Good morning. It is the Thursday, January 16th at Senate Agriculture. We have the honor of having the Secretary, Anton Tebbetson, today with a bunch of his folks, and you folks are the reason why we're here. So, Secretary, we're just going to have a wide-ranging discussion of whatever you want to tell us today. We have an hour and a half for you to get through whatever you think that we ought to know at our first introductory meeting. We have a brand new committee other than Senator Collmore. There's no detail that's too small that you think that we ought to know. So welcome and thank you for coming.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here, and congratulations on your election, and congratulations on landing in this committee. It's a wonderful committee, and we're going to do some great things. And as you know, our farmers and producers and those out in the rural parts of Vermont, and those even in our downtowns, producing wonderful food for Vermont and our region. So we're delighted to be here. So we do have a lot of people with us today, and we're going to talk about ticks. We're going to talk about entomology. We're going to talk about gas pumps. We're going to talk about avian flu. We're going to talk about economic development. We're going to talk about cows. We're going to talk about milk. So all that good stuff is right here with us. So we'll do that in a moment. But I first wanted to maybe just give you a sense, and it's our mission statement at the agency, and I think it's important that it gives you an idea of what we're all about. And the mission statement is: facilitate, support, and encourage the growth and viability of agriculture while protecting the working landscape, human health, animal health, plant health, consumers, and the environment. So that's what we do. So that touches our lives and everyone's lives every day as you come to work and whatever. So it's a pretty wide-ranging mission statement, but we're glad to help with that. I wanted to begin. I think maybe I'll start with the weather that you all have lived over the last couple of years and how it's impacted many of your constituents and so forth in every region of Vermont. So we know that a little history. We know we've had two significant floods in 23 and 24, and it's created a lot of challenges. And through that, we've been talking with our farmers. And we've got some data to share with you about. We've had some granting programs through the Commerce and Economic Development Agency and Agriculture, some of the losses. But I'll just give you a scope of the losses that some of our farmers have been having over the last couple of years. So we had 23 and 24. It began with a hard frost in 23. Some of your constituents may have lost some berries, may have lost some vines with the wine industry. Some of you may have lost some, strawberries and a lot of vines and all that kind of stuff happened during that period of time. So it was about a $10 million loss in May of 23. Everything was blooming, and then we got a hard frost, so it was pretty significant for the fruit and veggie business. Then we had our flood in July of 23. And we think the losses were up over close to $70 million in the food system for 23. And also we are keeping an eye on the forestry industry as well. They've had some severe weather, everything from not freezing and not being able to get into the woods over some of the last couple of winters, and some severe weather. So we think it's about $3 million in just the forest economy alone. And then we had another one this year. The flood was not as significant, but it did hit some regions extremely hard, and some of our farmers got hit twice. So they got 23 and they got 24. So the economic losses of that, again, are significant, well over close to 14 million, we think, in that area. But luckily, we've got some help on the way from the federal government, and this is probably the headline for all of you that's coming our way that will help us. With the help of the congressional delegation and Senator Welch on the Ag Committee, Vermont will receive a block grant for some relief for our farmers. Essentially what it is New England states, Hawaii and Alaska, will receive a direct appropriation, which most likely will come to the Agency of Agriculture, and then we will issue grants of severe losses from 23 and 24. The total pot of money is 220 million that will come to New England and those Hawaii and Alaska. USDA has asked us to send in all our data, all our losses, what we think it is, and then they will send back a number to us. And then we'll develop a program to get some money out to our farmers and producers from that. So we're still waiting on that. We've submitted our memo to USDA through the Farm Service Agency, and we'll wait to hear back what they get, what our dollar figure will be, and we don't know, because we don't know the scope of what happened in other states. You know, there's significant flooding, and some of our other New England states, Massachusetts had some, Connecticut's had some, and then the other part of this forestry is included, so there may be some fires that were included in, you know, Hawaii or Alaska. So that's the good news. So we'll keep you apprised of that. If you talk with any of your farmers' constituents, just let them know that we'll be developing that program as it moves forward.
Yes.
Yeah.
Secretary, do you know yet how you'll prioritize the money that will be distributed? Is it by a certain type of farm or the amount of loss? Have you figured that out yet?
We have not figured that out, and we've asked, we think it will be flexible money, which is good. For example, we've asked them, we've had some of our producers that may have been in the floodplain would like to move maybe their hoop house or the greenhouse out of the floodplain and move it to higher ground. Would that be an eligibility way we could use the money? And they're looking at that, but, you know, I think, you know, we've had, you know, crop losses will be part of it, you know. Under the state program, through we call the BGAP program, that was agriculture was part of the Commerce Plan. That was 30% of their losses. So if and that was physical losses. So it wasn't like, for example, if someone had you pick your own blueberries, and they weren't able to do that, they could do the economic loss of that. They could do the physical losses of it and so forth. So. So they've only, a lot of them only been covered about 30% of their losses. So I think there's a lot to make up, because, you know, some farmers, you know, lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in these floods. But we put a series of questions to USDA to answer some of those questions, and we hope it will be flexible money that we can do, maybe some mitigation dollars as well. So if farmers wanted to do something, as well as just the economic loss that they've had and the physical loss, that we can do something flexible. We'll get that. We hope to get some of those answers, and we don't know that. I think we don't know the timetable on this. I think there is some effort to move it along, because some states have had no programs at all for their producers or farmers. So some states are really pushing for USDA to make some decisions.
So usually, Secretary, when we are seeing this type of money come out of there, there's mandates or there's a lot of direction that comes from the source of the money. And it sounds like you're not hearing a lot of that right now. It sounds like it's gonna be kind of up to you to figure out how to get that out the door.
I think so. There will be some things that we will have to follow. There is another program through FSA with crop loss, and one thing that they did say to us, they don't want to pay a farmer out of this and then pay him out of this as well. So we've got to make sure that they're not getting two payments from, because there's another larger USDA program for crop loss that they've authorized as well, but that's being run by the federal government. This one will be, comes to us, and then we'll get the money out in a program.
I think we had some more questions.
You asked it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I
Good, please.
follow up, and you have to forgive me, because I'm a bit of a neophyte as far as agriculture, so as much as you can learn. Is there insurance for these losses, and is it through government insurance or private company?
There is an insurance program that is run through USDA, but as we found through our, we have a flood task force that we stood up at the end of '23. The return on investment is pretty limited. Our farmers, essentially don't have the size and scale to really take advantage of some of those insurance programs. And Nicole Dubuque is here as head of operations. She's a co-chair of our task force. They've done a deep dive on the insurance issues with farmers. And I think they've made some recommendations that would have to be made at the federal level to make it kind of more to our size and scale. But there are some that do participate in crop insurance. But the biggest feedback we've heard is it doesn't really, the effort's too big and it doesn't really return enough. So that's part of a bigger national issue with, because they're designed for some of the larger rural crops, so.
Thank you.
So it sounds like we're gonna have a lot more to talk about that at some other time when you
Yeah.
have more information, so we'll,
Yeah.
on
And
we
we
go.
really, once we welcome any feedback, if you hear from constituents what you think they need, and then we'll develop that program, and of course, messaging will be very helpful to you all to, once we know what it is, to make sure people know about the program. Everyone is so busy, you gotta really tell people 6 times that this is it. And we're trying to develop it will be somewhat easy and efficient for them to apply. That will be one of our goals as well. So that's good, and we're appreciative that we can 23 and 24, so both of our severe weather events
Nice.
as well. I don't know if I can pass it along to some of the directors.
Whatever you,
Okay.
it's
Sure.
this is your
And-
time.
Sure, and why don't we start with Steve Dwinell's gonna come up, and Steve does a lot with pesticides and entomology and so forth, and he's one of our directors, and he can tell you what he all does.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Steve Dwinell. I'm the Director of the Division of Public Health and Agricultural Resource Management for the agency. And we're a relatively small division. We're a regulatory division. We have 11 statutes we're responsible for implementing. We have 19 full-time staff. We have between 6 and 8 seasonal people we bring on to help us during the active seasons. We have 9 general areas, 9 general program areas. One of them is to register and regulate agricultural inputs like fertilizer, commercial feed, seed, and pesticides. So we register those, make sure they meet the standards they're supposed to meet, and work with those industries to make sure they're in compliance with the statutes. We regulate plant nurseries, so we inspect and regulate nurseries that sell plant material, make sure they're not selling invasive plants or plants that shouldn't be distributed. We inspect them for disease. If they have diseased plants, we'll have them pull them out of the stock, that kind of thing. And it's kind of a minor function, but an interesting one is we also register ginseng harvesters. So folks that harvest ginseng and sell it have to be registered. We have a set of rules associated with that. We register, inspect, and assist Vermont beekeepers. So we have a full-time apiarist, state pollinator health specialist who, just as an aside, was just elected to be the president of the Apiary Inspectors in America. So she's well respected in the industry, obviously, and knows what she's doing. We certify and license pesticide applicators and dealers. So we have any pesticide that's distributed in the state has to be registered. And we have 3 different categories of pesticides. We have category A, category B, category C. Category A are products that can only be bought by or sold by people who are certified to handle those pesticides. And we have category B, which is called controlled sale. You don't need a certificate, don't need to be certified to buy or use it, but there are limited places that can sell them, and then they have to have a particular license to sell those. And then we have category C, which are the general run-of-the-mill consumer kind of things you can buy at Home Depot or Walmart or whatever. We ensure compliance with pesticide rules. We have a set of rules regarding how pesticides have to be used. That includes record keeping, storage and disposal, and we're responding to complaints that anybody might have about a pesticide use. We have 4 field inspectors, each have part of the state that they're responsible for. They get to know the applicators in their region, and they inspect them on a regular basis and answer any questions. They also participate in training courses. We do have a whole series of training opportunities that we provide to certified applicators and to licensed dealers, and so we try to make sure they know what's going on.
I'm starting to hear some complaints on some of the ag stores about some of what we passed last year about rodent pesticides and stuff that are coming off of the shelves that people are, obviously we passed a law so they can't be on the shelves. Are you hearing any pushback from any of the dealers?
Well, we've heard some grumbling, I guess you could put it, but I mean, we were pretty active in educating about what they had to do. We also had an effort, we can do another briefing on it if you'd like. We made a pretty active effort to educate folks who sell rodenticides what the requirements are. So, for example, a lot of the rodenticides, which can be bought still just by consumers, it's a legal requirement that they be put into a bait box. You can't restrict, you can't just go out there and throw them around. They have to be in a bait box. And that wasn't being communicated to consumers. So if you go to any store now that sells rodenticide, you'll see a sign that says, if you use these materials, you have to put them in a bait box. So we've done that and educated the consumers about that. We have a video which Hanson narrated, which is on YouTube, which talks about how to do that. So we had an effort to do that. But yeah, that was, and actually that's part of a national effort. There's a national, at the level of EPA, to further restrict certain types of rodenticides, the ones that could potentially have secondary toxicity to predators. And again, we have a whole briefing on that if you'd like, a lot of details. We also have a program where we collect water samples, surface water and groundwater samples for pesticide residues. We do it, we have a number of established surface water monitoring sites. The Department of Environmental Conservation does that also, and we collaborate with them, so we have, we share information, we keep an eye on what's showing up in the surface water and in groundwater. We issue and enforce permits for certain types of pesticide applications. So under our rules, if you want to do a right-of-way application, if you want to apply mosquito adulticides with a ULB truck, or do an aerial application, or do an invasive species control on property, not your own property, but outside your own property, you have to have a permit. And so we have a process. Oh, on golf courses too. All the golf courses are permitted by us. And so we have a program for that. And then two other areas which is something I'd like to talk a little bit more about. We conduct surveillance for mosquito diseases, ticks. So we have a pretty active program where the tick surveillance actually just finished up. They do a fall, and they'll do another one in the spring. And then we'll start, at about May, we'll start doing mosquito surveillance. We have about 100 plus sites that we put traps out and check them on a regular basis, collect mosquitoes, identify the species. And certain species we'll send off either to the Department of Health lab or to CDC in Colorado and have them test them for viruses. And that's one thing I wanted to just bring up is last year, in that program, we had a record number of mosquitoes that had the Eastern equine encephalitis virus. And you may recall we had 2 human cases, 1 death, and a horse death. And the way that particular virus works with the insect, with the mosquito population, species that carries it, it goes in a cycle, and we're afraid we're on the uptick part of the cycle. So we're kind of anticipating and getting ready for a higher number of occurrences next year. And we're working real closely with the Department of Health, and giving all the information we have. And then if the numbers of mosquitoes carrying the disease are high enough, and the population is high enough, we may have to do some treatment. may do an aerial treatment in certain parts of the state to knock the population down, so we're kind of geared up for that too.
You do that now. I mean, I assume, I mean, I lived in Brandon, Vermont for a while, down in that area, and I can remember, this going around, and I can remember one bad year, it was just terrible.
Right.
So is that a program that happens
Well,
as needed?
Well, Brandon and Whiting, and a couple other towns in that area. Yeah, have there are two organized mosquito control districts in the state, London Fair and Otter Creek watershed. And it's based in Brandon. And they do routine monitoring and treatment for what are called nuisance mosquitoes, which are basically just mosquitoes that aren't, we're not suspecting that they're carrying disease, but there are high enough numbers that they're a problem. And so those are programs that we permit and regulate and work with, make sure they're following the rules and are doing it properly. But for what I'm talking about is if the populations of the particular species of mosquito that carry this disease are high enough, and last year they were up in the northwest part of the state.
Right.
And that area doesn't normally get mosquito control, so we'd have to do something there. We have contracts in place with aerial applicator, specialized aerial applicator and ground-based treatment. That if we had to, we'll go in there and knock those populations down. The decision to do that will have to be made by the Department of Health, though. Secretary Levine will be the one that decides if to do it or not, but we're just gonna be ready to do it.
So typically the area that's had the virus isn't a place where you do a controlled spray,
No.
but you're just preparing to. Okay.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And why do you suppose that it would be up in there, in that area, and not down into a heavy populated area as far as in Brandon, Forestdale area? Where
Well, the reason is because, the Eastern equine encephalitis virus is transmitted by a particular species, Helicium elmer, I don't know if it has a common name actually, but it breeds in acidic hardwood swamps.
Okay.
So, the problem with that particular mosquito, and it primarily feeds on birds, and so it's a bird mosquito disease cycle. But if the population gets high enough, you can occasionally get spillover to humans or horses, and it's a very you get the infection. You can get bitten and not have a reaction, but if you do get the reaction, and you do get the encephalitis, it's got a very high mortality rate. So it's a real problem, so we really are worried about it. But that's the reason that area, because that's where the swamps are, basically. The Mrs. Hoy Wildlife Refuge was a real hot spot last year for that.
Sure. How do you balance pesticides with the uptick? No pun intended.
Yes, no, that's the question.
Yes,
Right.
particularly last year was a
Right.
high
Right.
tick.
Yeah, so mosquito control is a pretty sophisticated process. And just as sort of real context, I was in Florida for 30 years, and it was, the regulator of the mosquito control programs in Florida. We did a lot of that kind of work because they had a lot of problems. Obviously Florida has a lot of mosquitoes. But anyway, you have to balance it, and you only treat when the population is high enough, and you can get control. You don't just go out and treat. So you monitor the population very carefully, and you time the application to hit the mosquitoes. And the particular application that's used is an aerial ultra-low volume is what it's called. And so it's an aircraft that flies at about 300 feet and releases a very fine mist of insecticide at a very low rate. We're talking fractions of an ounce per acre. And it basically forms a fog that moves through the air column as the mosquitoes are flying, and you put just enough out there to knock the population down. You also do it at a time, you do it at night, so people aren't around or active. Bees aren't flying, pollinators aren't active. You're trying to minimize any risk to any other, so you're trying to hit just the mosquito population, just the right dose. And then we do so we'll monitor all that, and then we'll do a post-treatment surveillance to determine if it was effective, and we got the population down to where we need it to be.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Steve, does there seem to be a correlation between the change in temperatures? You know, we haven't had below zero, and I don't know what the threshold is for either tick or mosquito, but at some point they
Yeah.
don't thrive.
Yeah, well, the species we have in Vermont are adapted to survive cold
Okay.
temperatures. So, you know, particularly severe winter isn't gonna like solve the problem. Obviously, the more warm temperature, the wetter it is, that's more conducive to mosquitoes. And actually, high moisture is actually a little worse for ticks because they have parasites that get them.
Oh.
But anyway, the bottom line is they're doing fine. And we're gonna have to live with them.
Okay.
They can adapt.
Right. Yeah, they've been doing this for a while, and they know what they're doing, so we just have to, it all boils down to surveillance.
Yeah.
You know, and keeping an eye on it, and having trained people who know what they're doing, and collecting the correct information, which is one of the reasons we work with Otter Creek. We wanna make sure they,
Yep.
you know, they have the skills that they need, because it is, you know, it is technically challenging to do it. And the good news is that the science of mosquito control is pretty sophisticated. There's a lot of work that's been done on how to do it correctly. So, but
Thank you.
I'll go ahead and let other folks talk.
Thank you very much.
Abby, we're gonna move into economic development now.
Yes.
A lot going on there.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Abby?
For the record, Abby Willard, I'm the director of the Ag Development Division at the agency. So we're one of the 6 divisions that many of which you'll hear from today. A major difference being that we're a non-regulatory division. So we do focus on economic development. We have 23 staff, which has grown significantly in the last 5 years. A third of our staff are supported with general fund dollars that are appropriated by this body. And 2/3, the remainder, are supported with special funds or federal resources. So one of the things that our agency and the Ag Development Division is good at is like bringing federal resources to the state. And with that, we've been able to grow our economic development team pretty significantly in the last 5 to 10 years. We have 5 sections within the division: market development, marketing and focus on export, and then 2 sections that are focused on specific programs. So one is the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative, which is our longest standing economic development program, been in existence since 2012. And then the Northeast Dairy Business Innovation Center, which is housed at the Agency of Agriculture, though it serves the 11-state Northeast region. And again, that's a federally supported program. And then we have a grants and contracts team. So given the hundreds of different grants that we put out every year in contracts, having an effective grants and contracts team that's very familiar with bulletins 5 and 3.5 is really an important part of the work that the division does. So what we do is we support a lot of businesses, we build partnerships, we make investments that help either grow markets or explore innovative new product development or creative solutions to challenges that businesses are facing. We focus a lot on messaging and communication and community engagement. So I would say that sort of summarizes a lot of the activities that the Ag Development Division does. Much of our work is spent in distributing grants. So in fiscal year 24, which is the last fiscal year that we have kind of like a full data set for, since we're in fiscal year 25 currently, we released 22 different funding opportunities, some of those with state dollars, some of those with federal resources. And we granted out over $11.4 million in fiscal year 24 to over 260 recipients, which is probably the largest, significantly largest kind of investment year that the division has had forever. But what's even more kind of both alarming and I think telling is the number of applications that those programs received. And Senator Palmore's heard me report on this year over year about sort of the oversubscription that our programs have. But in fiscal year 24, we had businesses and organizations request over $108 million in economic development asks from over 1,290 businesses and organizations. So we were able to fund just over 10% of the requests, and that means we have about 1,000 different business proposals and projects out there that we weren't able to invest in. So that may mean that those businesses are holding and waiting for another round of grants, whether it's through our agency or somewhere else, or they've made the decision to try to finance that project on their own, or they've sort of decided that that's not a growth or innovation or expansion that they're able to do. So we're very attuned to that population of individuals that didn't receive grants just as much as we are to celebrate the impact of those businesses that were awarded. I think another piece that might be of interest, and we have subject matter experts that can come in and talk to the committee about, you know, the various different granting programs. So if you wanted to do a deeper dive into the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative program, we have staff that could come in. If you wanted to hear about the Northeast Dairy Business Innovation Center, we have a team that would come in. Last year we had a new granting program called the Ag Development Grants, which were focused on specific sectors of diversification and investment in meat, maple, and produce, and we could talk about that program specifically. So just putting it out there that I can go into some detail if you have it, but it seems like it may make sense to kind of dedicate some specific time if you have specific questions. But the ways in which we make investments in agriculture and the food system, which is our, you know, the economic development goal is to see a vibrant working landscape, and explore kind of market growth and business viability improvement for our ag producers and our ag sector. So some of the ways that we do that are investing in different sectors. So we've had the opportunity of targeted granting programs that could invest in dairy or meat, maple, and produce, as I mentioned, in specialty crops. We also have been able to invest at businesses at different sizes and scales and stages of development, so investing in small farms. So last year, this legislative body supported a small farm diversification and transition program that was targeting specific size farms that were wanting to expand into something new, a new product, a new market channel. And then we also have funding opportunities that invest in larger scale businesses that are ready to do international exports. And so we can offer them trade show assistance grants for them to be able to go to different trade shows around the world, but generally around the country, to connect to new buyers and new markets. We invest at different stages in what we call the supply chain. So we can invest on farm where production is occurring, or in what's referred to as like the middle of the supply chain, where there's distribution or the storage or value-added processing, which is like a very critical infrastructure piece that we've learned over the last decade plus, that there's a lot of bottlenecks in that sector to ensure that our product make it to market. And then kind of supporting different market access opportunities at the buyer stage.
Okay.
Yes, please.
So I had the fortunes of being asked to go to Taiwan, and I went in November, and I went with 2 senators from Maine, 2 from New Hampshire, a senator from Massachusetts, 2 House members from Rhode Island, and Senator David Weeks and I from Vermont. And my mission was, I took over about 20 little bottles of maple syrup, and my mission was to get 20 to hundreds of thousands of gallons of maple syrup into the Far East, and had I had another 20 days, I could have done that. But I just didn't have enough time. But what we are trying to work with now is, in fact, we just had our first meeting, is to set up an economic office of 5 states in Taiwan, and to do that. And I think that we can probably get Massachusetts to crack that biggest nut of that. Because of their scope of what they have. And so I would talk with you about that at some time, if we could do that. In fact, I am going to have one of the Maine senators is now chair of agriculture in Maine, and I do plan to have her come down to the State House here. And so we would be very interested in meeting and trying to set something up over there. The access to those markets over there are unbelievable. We met with all the trade ministers. I mean, we're talking about getting into 6,000 different vendors and marketplaces by just having, you know, and it's not just trying to sell this product in Taiwan. It's just Taiwan's the beacon of freedom over there, and to be able to have this office. And at one time, Vermont did have an office there, from what I understand. And at some time during the Shuman administration or some point in time, they had ceased operations over there. So we'd be very interested in and furthering that to get these Vermont, well, in fact, to be fair to the other 4 states besides ourselves, to get New England product over into that area of the world, I think would be very, very great.
Yeah, that's really exciting. We have participated, the agency has participated in a variety of trade missions that sounds like a very similar effect, which is sort of bringing Vermont products and producers and economic development staff we went to Japan, we've been to, to China, to other countries to sort of explore market opportunities and sort of meet with trade officials. Secretary Tebbets has been on some of those trade missions, and it's a great opportunity to sort of showcase what Vermont has to offer for products. And then we participate in a food export program which helps finance businesses to be able to make those international trade relationships. So again, thinking about how do we support businesses at all different stages and sizes, that opportunity works for many of our businesses that are at a scale that they are not looking at direct-to-consumer markets as much, but only looking at wholesale, hoping for that kind of export opportunity. And our maple industry, as well as our dairy, are two of, I think, the most established and sort of like market-ready industries to be able to scale to that type of export. So that's very exciting.
It was very exciting. I was very dismayed, actually, that a society that loves natural sugars, and nothing more natural than maple. You drill a hole, put it in a bucket and boil it, and then it keeps forever.
Did you tell them it was that simple?
I did. That simple. And to go there, believe me, I told them. And to have them not even understand what that was.
Yeah.
When I know, sampling some of their product, it's the same idea, but ours is better.
That's
it would be to open that market up where there's 1 billion people plus. If we could get 1% of that market, we wouldn't be able to tap enough trees in the state of Vermont. I'm quite sure of that. So.
We also receive at the agency a federal marketing fund through USDA called ACER, which is sort of the Latin name for maple, that focuses on exploring new market opportunities. And we've been looking at Texas, for example, so like within the United States, but where we looked at, like airplane travel routes of how many, movement between Vermont and other parts of the country where there was, logically a relationship or a connection established, and so an opportunity in the barbecue industry in Texas. But we've also looked at some international markets, and I think the ACER grant funds, which we have access to every few years, could also be, kind of established to target potentially Taiwan as a
trade routes of the world started, right?
market.
The trade routes of the world did the same thing. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we have a lot to talk about and connect you to our marketing team.
Mr. Chair, first of all, thank you,
Yeah,
Director
welcome.
Woolley. Your grant process, having written some grants, the grant writing is not the easiest thing in the world to do.
No, it's not.
Particularly if you're you're a farmer and you're working. So, do we have communication and how to do that? Secondly, you fund about 10% of your applications, if
Last fiscal year, yes.
Right. So, do we also, to these the farmers that didn't get grants, do we give communication? Hey, here are some federal grants that you can get, or some foundational grants that you can also apply for, since we didn't fund. Do we do that as well?
Yeah, great questions. Our granting team has standardized over the past 10, 15 years a lot of our grant making processes, which we've had to do out of necessity as we've kind of grown the programs, and they all have different eligibility criteria. Some come with specifications from this body, some come with federal requirements, but we've tried to streamline the process and the experience for the customer as best we can. We have an online grant portal called Web Grants, which is what we use to sort of both filter all applications that come in, all invoices and claims as they come from the businesses, and where all reporting, in progress reporting is required of our grant recipients. We originally thought that businesses in the ag and food sector were never, and forest sector, which we also support through the Working Lands Program, were never going to submit grants. And what we're realizing is that with the right guidance, with clear instruction, with kind of consistent opportunity and the same process being available year over year, and some of our and collective partnership investments in helping with technical assistance, businesses are willing. So we had almost 1,300 businesses apply for grants through this same web grants portal last year, just in our economic development program. And there's other grants within our agency that businesses also applied for, particularly in the water quality division.
The Maple, they've had where they can get large grants right now, and some of them sugar makers. Do you know about that grant? The grants that are out there?
No,
It might be on the
please.
federal side because there's a lot of money there, but nobody's accessed it. And I think part of it is because filling out the grant application is such
Is difficult.
Yeah, very difficult. So
Yeah.
is that something the sugar makers could call? to have
Yeah,
help?
so there's great, they could call us and we could help connect them to resources, and we do this all the time where we hear from businesses that are wanting to do a project and they don't know where to go for resources, or they know what they want to apply for and they don't feel that they have the capacity or the confidence to be able to complete an application. Our team may not be the one that provides that grant application or writing assistance, but we connect them to resources that do. So there's the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board has a farm and forest viability program that has, dozens of business advisors located around the state that are available to help businesses think about where they should apply and what might be the right funding source depending upon their vision or their market channel or the quality of life they want to have as a business or what products they're producing. And they can help connect businesses to different funding sources. There's also an affiliated program called READY, which is designed to help businesses in rural communities with specific grant writing assistance. So there's even, over time been developed that capacity to actually work with the business advisors to sit down and write a grant application. I will say though that our experience has been that some of the federal funds that have been made available in meat slaughter and processing, potentially this case in the maple sector, though I will admit I'm not familiar with this in particular, are not very accessible to our scale of operations. And so we've had to have many of those conversations with USDA and other partners that these don't reach our businesses based on the production scale or the complexity of the application or the design plans that they expect businesses to have.
From what I was told by this person was that the money's there, they just people haven't taken the time. And they changed it from, how many classifications, they'll narrow it down so it's hard to get the money. They've opened it up because nobody's been taking advantage of it. So
we could look at, if you would send it to me or I can reach out to get it from you, we'd be more than happy to sort of look into it a little bit more.
Sure.
Make sure that the Maple Sugar Makers Association is aware and maybe they have some ideas as well.
All right.
Thanks for bringing it up. So Senator Major, the last piece I wanted to respond to was that those 1,000 businesses in fiscal year 24 that we did not give a grant to, every application that is reviewed has very specific and targeted review comments from at least 3 reviewers throughout the process. And we send personalized and targeted responses to every denied applicant to say, we're happy to share very specific feedback on your application. And when appropriate, we offer various other funding opportunities that they could pursue that are either a better fit or the timeline may be more appropriate or the size and scale might be a better match. Unfortunately, there's really, again, in most recent years, many really high-quality applications that we don't have a lot of concern with. We just haven't had the resources to allocate. So, great projects have been denied because outstanding projects were just ahead of them in being funded. But we're always open to additional suggestions on how we can connect to businesses and support applicants in their kind of development efforts. But I think we have also made significant intentional efforts in providing them the support that will hopefully help them access grants or other capital or other funding that they could explore.
One of the things that made me feel good about when you started your presentation is that you said communication. And without a doubt, that to the possible recipients has to be on a constant, not just the one time, but on a constant basis, letting them know that these funds are available.
Yeah.
And however we can help guide them in that direction. But it sounds like you're doing a tremendous job.
Yeah, I'm sure there's more we could do.
Sure.
But one of the ways that we share what our funding opportunities are that are available is through a weekly ag bulletin, kind of email newsletter that goes out on Sundays. This came out as a result of the pandemic period when people weren't engaging in the same ways, but it's become a really critical part of our outreach and communication efforts. So it reaches about 5,000 ag and food kind of folks that are either businesses or partners or some other constituency within the sector. And it highlights what are the funding opportunities or training opportunities or success stories or new release of resources that are available. So if you're all not receiving that and would be interested in, I can share with Linda the link so that you could get that update every Sunday when you're at home and having a cup of coffee and want to see what's happening in the ag world.
It consistently comes out when the pages are down by 21 points. So it's a great diversion. About 5:30 on Sunday.
So it come out a lot this year?
Yeah, so 5:30 at night it comes in my inbox, so I really enjoy the diversion.
So being a Bills fan, I'm
Wow.
You'll never get it.
excited.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's a great, it's like 4 or 5 things, and it's become very popular.
Yeah.
So.
Well, good.
Great. Well, thanks for being interested in the economic development work that we do. I'm happy
Thank
to
you.
come back.
So I think we'll be chatting.
Okay. All right, EB.
EB's gonna come up. EB is the head of consumer assurance, and there's a lot going on there, everything from avian flu to dairy inspections to weights and measures. So,
all sorts of fun things. Well, thank you for the the time today to come and speak with you all. And for the record, my name's E.B. Flory, and within the Agency of Agriculture, I am the Director of Food Safety and Consumer Protection. And within our division, our mission statement is to ensure safe food and fair markets for all Vermonters. Our division is the largest division in the Agency of Agriculture. We have 44 staff members currently, and we cover everything from milk, maple, produce, ag products, meat, and we cover gas pumps, scales, animal health, to scanners and other things. So we cover many things, and we like to say that on any given day, anyone in the state of Vermont, they're interacting with our division, whether it's people that live here or come to visit our beautiful state. They're impacted by our division every single day. So there's been a very busy year this past year, whether it was the flood event impacting our produce farms and dealing with floods, to individuals that thought they were getting gas that had water in it from gas stations that were flooded. And so we had staff members going out to make sure that gas stations did not have water in their storage tanks and other things impacting consumers, things like that. To dealing with, you may have heard that we're dealing with something for the first time that we're aware of in the history of the world, with a disease that spread that usually impacts poultry, has spread to dairy cattle. And so that's something that our division has been involved with in working with the federal government. That's kind of been a blur this past year in dealing with that. And we've also had, we've seen continued growth across our division in our meat sector. We've seen additional plants come on this year, which has been really exciting for seeing additional individuals moving to our state, seeing our farmers diversifying, having whether it's crossbred cattle or having smaller, diversifying into smaller animals and being able to increase individuals that are slaughtering, or having diversified operations, different slaughter days to accommodate those needs. integrating in a mobile slaughter facility to help cover. We've had decent access in the past, but some stoppages with a lot of slaughter facility only wanting to handle large breeds of animals, and so having for some individuals options for your smaller animals, goats and sheep, and so trying to work with industry with that. And we've also had more vendors coming on, being able to do ready-to-eat products, things like that in the meat world. And so our division, we stay very busy, and we like to stay in the background. We don't really want to be in the limelight. If we're in the limelight, that means that something bad has happened. So we prefer to do our roles and try to prevent food safety incidents or prevent situations where people aren't getting what they pay for. Our weights and measures section spends a lot of their time making sure whether it's propane or fuel trucks, meters, asphalt plants, you name it, anything involved with a scale, like that integrity when you go to the market and you measure your fruit, or when a propane truck or a fuel truck, an oil truck comes to your home, that ticket that you get, that meter that is pumping for someone and says you got X amount of gallons or what have you, that's actually what you got and that you're paying for what you have. That we have staff across the board in the whole state, like ensuring, as Anson said, like consumer assurance that people are getting what they pay for. So we have a very, very dedicated team across our division that's very passionate for what we do. And we do field a lot of complaints and other things that come from constituents, and we try to make sure that whatever those issues are, that we find out, and if those are founded, that we follow up with those businesses and work with them to correct those issues and educate them to try to mitigate those problems for the future. So.
And where are we with the cross-contamination from going from bird to cattle, as far as that? It's made the news some and it's caused a little fear, especially in the dairy parts of the state.
Yeah.
Where are we with that?
So right now it's, I'll do just a general overview. Currently to date, it first started in the panhandle of Texas, and the current epidemiology study that has been done and continues to be done by USDA still shows that they believe it was a single spillover event. And what that means and what's important for our farmers is that as the cattle strain of HPAI continues to spread on dairy farms, is that it is spreading from cattle to cattle or from fomites, which would be like the virus on someone's clothes or on their shoes or on a cattle trailer that wasn't cleaned appropriately. It's spreading through that contact and not through birds to cows. So that's really important. Like we've had a lot of our farmers are worried that, migratory birds coming through their farm or eating their feed, like they're worried that they're going to get HPAI. And there has not been evidence to date since that one event in Texas, which was in late February, early March of 2024, but that's not how it's still spreading. So USDA is spending a lot of time and effort, and they can track as it has spread through the country, that it is spreading from cattle to cattle. And so USDA's initiative, they do believe that the strain that is impacting dairy cattle, that they can eliminate it. And to date, the closest states that have had the dairy strain to Vermont has been Ohio and North Carolina. In looking at what we have seen across the country, the movements that USDA has traced is from animal movements, and we don't believe that this is in New England. USDA, about a month and a half ago, released an initiative where they wanted to increase their surveillance in an effort to find where the virus is, to try to find it and then eliminate with more data, knowing where it is, to try to mitigate spread, again with an effort to extinguish it. In working with USDA and with Secretary Tebbets, we identified as a state because we export so much of our milk, Our plan within Vermont, and we started this at the beginning of the new year, we have started testing our dairy farms at the bulk tank level. And so we are testing each one of our cow dairy farms once a month. And so far, all of them have been negative. So we just started a few weeks ago. We've tested right now right around 50 farms, and we're easing in and developing our processes. Things are going well, and so far we don't believe this is in New England. There's also been requirements since April of 2024 from USDA for any lactating dairy cattle leaving the state, so this would be nationwide, that they had to be tested. And across all of New England and New York State, we've not had any animals test positive. Also, like any cow that has showed symptoms of like HPAI, like veterinarians have had to submit samples. And we've not had any in New England or New York State test positive. So currently, we don't believe that it's here. But we are participating in this program with USDA for monitoring. So at this point, we are monitoring to make sure that it's not here. And if it does show up, we will be able to respond quickly to mitigate spread and to help USDA in their initiative to try to extinguish this strain.
Mr. Chair, what's the protocol if it does happen on a farm? Do they stop shipping? What will be the protocol of
So
my farm? It comes on it. Now what happens?
So, excellent question. Early on in this response, the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, they are the federal agency that handles the milk safety, and that's who I primarily work with. Dairy is my specialty within our division at the Agency of Agriculture, and they confirmed overwhelmingly that pasteurization eliminates the virus. So the food supply is safe with dairy, and that was a very relieving thing to confirm. And we have confirmed with our milk cooperatives and processors in the state that if we did have a positive case, as long as the milk is going to pasteurization, farms would still be able to ship their milk. So there wouldn't be an issue with milk leaving the farm. And so if we did have a positive case in Vermont, our animal health section within our division would work with the farm. We would put them in what we call a quarantine, which would be working with the farm to identify animal movements going on and off the farm, and identifying ways to clean equipment or cattle trailers and things like that to prevent the potential spreading of the virus to other farms. States that have dealt with this and other farms that have dealt with it, like an adjustment, for instance, would be like animals that need to go off the farm for slaughter. Instead of going to like an auction or to an open market, they would just go direct to a slaughterhouse. Things like that, where we're not opening up for other animals that could possibly get it and spread it to other farms. And it's every farm is different. Every farm is managed differently, and like how long do herds have it fluctuates. And so our animal health staff would work with the farm until it has cleared the herd. Unlike with poultry, when they get HPAI, usually with that you're going to see the poultry flocks, they don't survive the virus. Cows are resilient and they do survive the illness. And so you normally see animals ill for a week to 2 weeks. And so we would be working with the farms until the virus has cleared the farm, and then we would lift the quarantine and things would go back to normal for them.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, EBF, it started in Texas, and it has gotten, assuming all the other states are equally as vigilant in terms of keeping track of what's going on, so it's moved up to North Carolina and then to the west to Ohio. Wouldn't it be likely that we would see sort of a state by state, almost a domino effect, which would give us a little bit of an advance warning? Does that make any sense?
Mr. Senator Collmore, so some of the initial spread that happened early on was we didn't even know what we were dealing with as a country. And so what first happened in Texas, it was in Texas and then it went to New Mexico, and veterinarians didn't know what was going on. And, you know, it was just like we have these symptoms, respiratory illnesses. Cows didn't really want to drink. They didn't want to eat. You could tell they just didn't feel good. And it's like, what's going on here? And a veterinarian in Texas was like, I'm sending a milk sample in to test for HPAI. Like, we're just testing for all these things, and it tested positive. And it was just like, this has never happened before. Like, wow. So this in-between time, for some of these farms that are really big, you had cattle moving to other farms, like you had, heifer facilities, you had calving facilities, and all these other farms in other states where they were all moving
Okay,
around.
yep.
And so some of it jumped around initially just because of that. And USDA put incrementally in place certain parameters for movement. And then some of the spread has been found that unfortunately some people did move animals illegally. And so that's been some of the issues that the federal government has been working and trying to handle. For the farm in North Carolina that had it, that was probably at least 6 months ago. And they were what I would call a closed farm, which would be a bit more common in Vermont. They all had their animals all on one property. They got it from one animal. And they kept their farm closed herd, all animals in one place. It cleared and they're fine, back to business as usual. So it did not spread to a lot of other farms. So like, their quarantine in place. No, to my knowledge, no other dairy farm in North Carolina got it, and things returned back to normal for them fairly quickly. So.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair? And there is no antibiotic for it, you just run, it's a virus, so they just let it run its course, right?
Yes, like treatments for the animals, like private veterinarians are working with the farms to, treat the symptoms for the cows and making them comfortable and keeping them hydrated and other things like that. USDA is working on vaccine development, but some of that, what USDA has said is that is not the sole solution, and also vaccines do have trade ramifications in accepting like meat and other things internationally in our products. So I don't know, if a vaccine will be officially approved or not. So, but that is different things that are in development.
So cattle to cattle spread, it hasn't hit the food source yet, and hopefully maybe if they were to use, I know it's hard to imagine how you get chicken into cattle as far as the feed source, but fat or whatever that they're using for grains and all that, hopefully in that cooking process of grain or whatever, that would be like pasteurization and milk, so it could spread in that way.
So, like feed sources and whatnot, like food wise, like the milk coming from animals, like pasteurization eliminates any of that. There is not a concern with feed going into dairy cattle. Like dairy cattle are not getting this from birds. There have been some cases where farm workers that worked on a farm that had the cow strain, they were assisting with either milking the cows that had it or helping treat cows that had it. They went home with their dirty clothes or their shoes and worked on another farm on the weekend that had poultry, and poultry got it, like that strain. The cow strain is deadly to domesticated poultry, so it can spread in that manner. The other confusing point is that the migratory bird strain in wildlife, that HPAI strain that I'm just going to call the bird strain, that is a different HPAI strain that cattle are not getting. They are two separate ones, and that is still a susceptible strain to, like in Vermont, our backyard poultry flocks. So currently we do not believe that we have the cow strain of HPAI in Vermont. We have had a case of the migratory bird HPAI strain. We had that in late December with a backyard poultry flock, and that was for migratory birds. But there have been studies done on our meat supply, properly cooking beef. It's safe to consume. There's not been any trade ramifications or anything like that with our meat or any of our dairy products, and they've been rigorously tested, and as long as the milk is pasteurized, like all of our dairy products are safe for consumption.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you, Amy. Maybe move to the lab. So Cheryl's with us, and we have a facility in Randolph Center, and Cheryl is the director of the lab. It serves not only agriculture but the Agency of Natural Resources, DEC, as well. So Cheryl.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Cheryl Achilles. I'm the lab director, as Secretary Tebbets indicated.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's nice to meet you all. And Senator Collmore, nice to see you again.
Thank you. Last man standing.
That's right. That's okay.
He's been calling it purgatory. I don't know what he means by that.
Was never a word I used.
It's not so bad.
So the Vermont Ag and Environmental Lab is referenced in two ways. They call it VALE as a general overview, and it's the facility that houses both DEC staff and Agency of Agriculture staff in there. So they go ahead as the building, but there's an analytical lab that's also called the VALE lab. So still a little confusing to me, but I just wanted to make that clear. So when I
Is this the lab that in conjunction with VTC, and then
is.
we put a new heat source in there because we were trying, the VTC was, they weren't open enough in the summertime, and then sometimes they'd get shut down and you'd have to throw out all your work and all of that.
Yes, funny you bring that up. That heat source, that heat source is not in place yet.
Oh,
So we're
okay.
still
Oh,
dependent upon the
I think we gave
boiler.
you some money for that, so we'll have to talk to somebody about that to help you out with that.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, we've been working with Buildings and General Services
Yes.
with that, and they're in the process of working out the bidding process.
Okay.
So that's the last I had heard on that, but that's their bailiwick.
Well, I have to be on that committee too.
Oh,
So
good, okay.
maybe we can talk about that a little bit more.
Well,
for you.
thanks, Senator Ingles, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
That'd be great. So our facility was completed in 2019, for those of you that don't know. The lab was flooded out. It moved around, actually. It was in the Agency of Ag building. It was in Berlin. It was then in Waterbury, up at UVM, and now we're in Randolph Center. And the DEC staff had a lab, and they decided to save costs, merge. And so that's how VALE was born, if you will. So we have 15 analytical staff that I'm in charge of, but there's about 35 overall staff that come in and out of the lab. So the divisions that sit in there, the Agency of Agriculture has some of EV's staff, so Food Safety Consumer Protection. The Weights and Measures Lab is in there, and the Animal Health Lab. Director Dwinell's lab, the Farm Lab, so it's the Public Health Ag Resource Management crew. They have the Plant Health Pest Management group downstairs, and the Entomology Lab. DEC has Fish and Wildlife. They have a Fish Biology Lab, so they're monitoring all of the fish hatcheries, health of all the fish that they stock in all the lakes and ponds and things, to make sure they're not introducing any weird illnesses into the wild population. Forest and Parks works, their forest biology crew works a lot with our plant health and pest management team. So they have a very nice entomology exhibit, if you will. They're working on digitizing that. They've lost that catalog a couple of times over the years, but hopefully now we're safe from floods and all of that. They actually have safes, if you will, that are fireproof and waterproof, so fingers crossed. And once they digitize everything, which is an extremely big project, that'll also be, there forever, hopefully. We also have a watershed management division team, so they monitor all the lakes, ponds, and tributaries, and they collect samples of non-potable water for us, surface waters and things, for us to test, things like phosphorus runoff, chloride, and all of that sort of thing. And they also collect leaf litter from the bottoms of streams, and then they their winter project is to go through that leaf litter just to see what kind of wildlife is in there. So if there's a lot of bugs and mollusks and things, that's a good thing in their book, as long as it's not an invasive species. They, that kind of indicates the health of the stream that they're looking for. So some of our staff go down to help with that, bug picking they call it, so it's been kind of a fun winter project. A lot of our testing occurs over the summer, so starts in March, I'd say, heavily, and goes through November, and slows down in the winter months, because obviously as things freeze up, they can't collect samples. So that's good and bad, right? So we also, the lab, my analytical lab overview, we partner with the Agency of Ag divisions, DEC, and the Health Department, and our data sometimes informs actions that they want to pursue. So for instance, we have 3 programs within the lab. There's a microbiology program, so that supports EV's division. So we test milk and dairy products for drug residue, so the antibiotic, if there's any antibiotics in the milk, for example, bacteria, and pasteurization quality. We also have staff, 2 dedicated staff that goes out to dairy facilities around the state to ensure that any tests conducted at the local level are being followed under the FDA pasteurization milk ordinances. So there's some specialty training with that. We also provide testing for infectious diseases in equine and livestock, and for performance-enhancing drugs at local fair, horse bulls, for example. Potable and non-potable water testing for E. coli and torricoliform, so bacteria in the water that could make people sick. We also do tick testing for emerging diseases. So Steve's group goes out and collects ticks. That's our wintertime fun, is doing tick testing, and we monitor for emerging pathogens there. So they're looking at existing things, where it's tracking within the state, such as Lyme. We know that Lyme's pretty prevalent in Vermont, but we're also looking for emerging viruses too. And so that's a kind of a trifecta, working with the VDH and the farm division with that. So that's good. If you can't tell, we're like a support division. We're not out there in the forefront, but we're quiet partners supporting all of that. We also do cyanobacteria monitoring, and we work with the DEC drinking water division and also the surface water, lakes and ponds division. So if you've probably heard over the summer, algal blooms generally happen towards the end of the summer after a long, hot summer. And we had a lot of positive hits, and that testing generally comes from our lab. Occasionally, it's the warnings go out by folks reporting what they see too. So that's kind of a twofold thing. But the tests actually happen at the Vale. In organic chemistry, we have a program that does non-potable water quality testing. I touched upon that with the chloride, phosphorus, lead, mercury, things in water. They have an air toxics metals program as well. They work with DEC. DEC goes out and collects air samples and delivers it to our lab. We do feed and fertilizer testing, and pet food and pet treat label guarantees. So the Agency of Ag has a whole program under Steve's division that helps new people that want to produce pet food and sell it in Vermont. There's a requirement that they have a pet food label guarantee that has fiber and fats and proteins there. So
you're doing a lot there.
yes. And the other part of that too is farm goes out and collects around stores and things like that. We do spot checks to ensure that the label that's on the bag of dog food or cat food actually says the right thing. So we kind of doing it that way too. So we get a lot of samples that way. And We also have an organic chemistry testing group. So that program does a lot of pesticide residue monitoring and for enforcement or complaints that come in, unknowns, that gets delivered to the lab. So that helps farm. We also do air quality testing. So any of the organic chemistry tests that are in air that make you sick, DEC, it comes in like a little air canister and they deliver it to the lab. So, and we also provide support for local universities. So, for example, UVM and Norwich University here this summer, we undergraduate students do projects, sometimes on a lake or stream project that they're doing. So we provide inorganic chemistry testing for them to help anything that they don't do. Sometimes those schools don't have that particular instrument that we do, so we can help them with their data sets so they can keep on going with their projects. Some of the test improvements that we've done over the last year, we've expanded our cyanobacteria monitoring capabilities. So in the drinking water realm, they wanted to expand not just using the existing kit we had, but to see what was actually all the total microcystin is the type of cyanobacteria that they were interested in, and so we modified our testing for them so they were able to do that. And so the next step they want to do is another method to see if there's some equivalency or if the next method is more robust. So we're working towards an EPA method that we kind of want to go track along with, so we can have federal level quality data that aligns with everything, so we can speak the same language, if you will. We also expanded our surface water testing. So those algal blooms that I mentioned before, there's 4 toxins that we're working with. So it's not just microcystins, there are others that can make people and animals sick, so we're monitoring that as well. We've improved some of the safety in our testing. So for example, one of our instruments required the staff to carry a large jug of acid over their head and put it on top. So we're working to get a new instrument that's coming soon where we can improve that so nobody gets burned, so to speak. We also have just this week received certification for our drinking water to do Method 533, that's PFAS in drinking water. And I just want to temper expectations. I reported this to the House Ag and they got excited, and I got already a customer looking for testing. So the next step that has to happen, we're working with DEC to roll out a more robust program. We have the capability to do the testing, but we want to do it smartly. So once we produce that result, we want to know how the whole process is going to be. So if somebody has a question, can DEC or the health department be ready to answer those questions, what those health effects could be, et cetera.
Who are your clients on all these tests? Interagency or everyone? Anyone can send in?
Right now, it's going to be interagency, only because there's some complications with the field collection. It's very strict.
Yeah.
And so we're new at this, and we want to do it right the first time. So we want to dip our toe in the water, so to speak, carefully, and be able to provide a good service, and then consider offering it out to the public. But that's future time frame. The capacity, I think, or the interest is going to far outweigh our capacity. But anyways, the certification was a big hurdle, and that's only one part of the step. That's drinking water. We're working towards surface water, soils, vegetation, and food. So there's interest in that as well. That's a whole nother method, and we're working hopefully in the next few months to get that completed. Certification will come later down the road. We did some pesticide, or will do some pesticide testing expansion. So Steve's group has asked us to look into that for their programmatic interests. And our lab information system, it's called the LIM system. It's every sample that comes into the lab gets a unique identifier. and everything is tracked through this LIMS system. So we are working towards upgrading that system this year, actually over the winter, and hopefully that's going to be completed. There's been some complications with the vendor. Nothing new there, right? But hopefully we'll get that done before the spring busy season occurs. But if that doesn't happen, we'll put a pause. We can use our existing system and then implement when it's slower. So that's exciting for us too. And that's it in a nutshell. Do you have any questions?
Well, Cheryl, thank you very much.
Yeah.
So this committee, and Linda can probably remember more than I think it was 2023. It's been a couple of years now. Did a tour. We drove down to Randolph and did a tour of the lab, and it was fascinating to me how much work does go on. So if there's a day where it's not crazy, I just would suggest if we had time to do that. I think
Yeah.
everybody in the committee would appreciate seeing what
we'd
happens.
welcome you
Yeah.
to actually visit,
Well,
yeah.
winter time, we want the heat on, so I have.
Well, that's true.
I have to do something with the institutions and get BCS going.
You betcha,
Yeah,
yeah.
so exert a little influence, I think.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
No.
Cheryl, thank you very
Thank
much.
you, thank
Sounds
you.
very busy, yes, I think we need to come see you.
All right, have a great day. Thanks.
I think we have one more, and Nicole's head of our operations, and mainly, probably the key part for all of you would be the budget. Nicole works with that, but also has done a lot with our flood relief and our severe weather relief as well, so.
We saved the best for last.
Maybe.
Oh,
They don't take you as a fan either.
You're the lawyer. So, yeah. I know how it feels. I know how it feels.
So I think I have enough copies here, but just for reference, I brought kind of an org chart of our agency so you can take a look at.
We're missing right now our water quality director, so I'll just say that that's one of our other divisions, and
She'll be coming tomorrow.
yes, I was just thank you, Linda. I was just going to say that. If you have any questions about the budget, I'm happy
sorry.
to take them.
Here we go.
Otherwise, I can talk about the Ag Recovery Task Force and anything to do with recovery or the state programs. I'll leave it to you where to start, because I know we're on limited time. And for the record, I'm Nicole Dubuque, I'm the Chief Operating
You start where you want to
Officer.
start.
Okay, I'm going to start with the Ag Recovery Task Force. So Secretary Tebbets had talked about the federal disaster declarations that we've had over the past couple of years, the flooding, the frost in 2023, as well as the flooding in 2024. The Ag Recovery Task Force I am the co-chair of. My co-chair is Dr. Roy Beckford from UVM Extension. And we started running task force meetings in August of 2023, and we are still going. We do drop-in sessions regularly, and then we've kind of moved to quarterly meetings. But that task force has really brought together ag partners, federal agencies, multiple branches of USDA, UVM Extension, as well as the Agency of Natural Resources and our agency. We make sure to collaborate, and we can survey the public and the ag sector together so that we don't have all of us asking farmers separately about their losses and damages. It's worked really well. We put out a report in 2023 on some recommendations, and then in 2024 we've continued to kind of work on that collaborative effort. One of the programs that came after the disasters was the Business Emergency Gap Assistance Program, around when in 2023, and then recently we had a round in 2024, and for agriculture specifically, we had around 100 applications that came through, and it was 13.5 million reported in damages for the ag sector, and then another 5 million reported for forest products. So we just to give you some background on BGAP, what it covers, and it's state funded, is 30% of physical damages reported on the application. So out of the 13.5 million reported for ag, we paid out 2.7 million. to folks. People have reported that that's very helpful, but obviously it doesn't make them whole, and I won't go into detail again because Secretary Tebbett's already touched on the issues that we have with being able to insure assets in Vermont, insure crops specifically, and also aging infrastructure. So I'll pause there if we have any recovery questions, and then.
I think we're good.
Okay.
Yep.
Budget questions. So I know Senator Collmore was here last year for our budget presentation, but obviously the rest of the committee is new. So our CFO had provided you with a quick spreadsheet.
Do we have yet?
And I have that here. So I'm happy to take any questions, or we can just review the whole thing. As you see, the base appropriations are divided out by our 6 divisions. Administration division is where I sit, and we haven't really talked about all the details that go into that, but that's the business office, including licensing and registration, our communications team, who is integral in creating that calendar you guys have over there, and then energy and land use, so like Act 250, Criterion 9B, and Section 248. So, yeah, base appropriations is broken down by division. We have general fund, special fund, federal fund there, and then we break it down with our one-time appropriations, which are specifically Northeast Organic Farming, Conservation Districts, NOFA Crop Cash, and Farm. Those were the one-time appropriations from last session. That would be for fiscal year 25. And then we have 2 capital appropriations in here, which would be the farm capital projects and the water quality. The heat plant that we were talking about earlier would be through BGS, so
Right.
we request it, but they have the money because they're doing
Exactly.
the actual work. So, yeah.
I think that one thing that would be helpful, just while you're all here, is to have you come in and talk to us about BGAT a little bit. We're hearing some of that. I mean, I know enough about it, but a new committee and all that would be very, very helpful if we could schedule some time with Linda with that as well. So,
Absolutely.
and just, we just have a few minutes left, and just kind of why we all have you here. You guys are, thank you for this. I know this is hard sometimes to bring what you guys bring, but on a new committee, it's very, very valuable to understand all of what you're touching and all what we're going to be listening to and have to know about. Just in the last few minutes that we have, the health of ag in the state of Vermont, how is it? Thank you very much.
Sure. Well, I guess again, Anson Tebbets. I guess it depends where you're standing. It's certainly undergoing change. If you talk about inputs for supplies, services, very high, and I think everyone knows that in their daily lives that's been a real difficult part for the farm community. On the dairy side, we are seeing somewhat decent prices for the price of milk, which has helped, but the inputs continue to be high. The organic community and dairy is I think going through some growing pains and struggling a little bit. Those inputs and the prices they've been locked into have not kept pace, so I think there's a little struggle with that. There's tremendous growth in maple. Again, we're seeing, we're the #1 producer of maple in the United States. 50% of all maple in the United States is made in the Green Mountains. So we've seen diversification is gone from maybe a dairy farm of having a few thousand taps to sole big businesses. So we have some significant maple. Your district, I believe, has the biggest maple producer with well over 600,000 taps.
Wow.
And they export. They really don't even market in Vermont. They export to other parts of the country through 6-ounce glass bottles. They market under Sapjack, but there are others that are making more value-added products of maple, but significant growth with that. We saw that with our
our grants where we earmarked a little bit of maple money for folks. We saw hundreds of applications, and technology in maple is really advanced. I think one of the programs, Senator, you were talking about was the specialty crop one, and that one, there was at the end of the USDA term here, they did put out a special one from USDA, and that was for specialty crops, and maple was eligible for that. So I checked with FSA, and they said there were a considerable amount of maple applications that were making through that part of it. So I think that was something new that came at the tail end. That granting program has ended. Veggies, produce, we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing a lot of products put in the mail and sent to people. Senator, you have one of the great meat producers in the Wagyu beef in Springfield. And their model is we put it in a package on Tuesday, and it's on a grill in Chicago on Friday night for folks. So you'll see that. You'll see Dakin Farms during Christmas time. A lot of stuff is being put in the mail because e-commerce. So there's a trend to direct-to-consumer. That's happening. And there's a lot of pressures on our farm community. The environment is huge. With them, there's a lot of mandates that are on them that they're stepping up and they're doing it, and it's going well. This is the 10th anniversary of Act 64, which is our major water quality law. People understand it now, so we hope that that will continue. But the investments, some of the investments to meet some of those are significant. There are cost share programs, but even with the cost share programs, 10% of a $500,000 system, manure system, is not a small amount to comply with. So, but there's been trends. We learned a lot of information through the pandemic where we learned our food system nationally probably wasn't the best. We found out it's probably best to have a regional food system. We can grow and produce a lot of high quality food. It's whether we can get it to our markets, and we're fortunate enough that we have significant markets to our south of us that may pay a little bit extra for that product because it is high quality. They know when they get Vermont cheese, it's high quality, but there's always there's a cost in association with that. We're struggling with labor, no issue there. Housing, you're going to hear a lot in this session about housing and education, but housing is significant because we have even small to medium cheesemakers are having trouble finding employees because there's no place to live, and it may be even down in Addison County with Cabot, they struggle with housing, and in my hometown of Cabot, they struggle with housing, finding enough workers, and so you get up into Greensboro in the Kingdom, you've got some cheesemakers up there that are struggling and having discussions about housing. So it's all connected with it, but it's an honor to be part of agriculture because in the end of the day, they're all feeding us, and that's their mission. They do a pretty darn good job of it. Think about all they do. So I know we're at the end of this, but we will see. If you want to meet a lot of your constituents, they'll be here on the 28th. I know that's budget day, but we're having a little reception with all the sort of the producers. So your beekeepers will be there. You'll get some good food. That's one good thing about this committee. You're never going to be, you're never going to. There's going to be good food everywhere you go on the Ag Committee. So that's at 4 o'clock. It's a nice reception. You get to meet some of the people, the various groups around the state. With your permission, yes. Mr. Chair, I wanted to just pass out some goodies. My card is in this, and also this publication, Edible Vermont, which gives you. I think I got 5. I got one short.
Yep, you're good.
I got, and then my card's there, and then there's a publication called Ag Review, which you may not be able to find in the New York Times, but you can find the Ag Review, which has been around a while. And we use it to communicate with the farm community. So there's programs, our granting programs. It's also available digitally, and we'll send along the digital sign-up sheet to you after the meeting. But you get a sense of the wonderful food with Edible Vermont, and they usually have a theme and so forth. It's just a fun publication that it's out there. I think it's based down in your neck of the woods. I think it's down in Benton County.
So just 30 seconds, less than it. Do you oversee cannabis as well?
We do not, but do we do the pesticide part of it, Steve?
Well, it's a little complicated.
A little complicated. So we don't, but we do, I know from time to time, you can talk about the pesticide. That would be probably the closest touch we get.
You're talking about food, you weren't talking about edibles, were you?
But, I've gone on tours and, the similarities of growing a crop. It's, it's the same, I've gone on tours to, the soil and the health and the pests, and so there's similarities to it, so.
Well, we want to thank you very much.
Can I, one final,
Yeah.
can I just introduce Steve Collier?
Yeah.
He's the lawyer, but I don't let him talk. But Steve is a real great resource. He works with your legislative council on language and whatever, and you'll see a lot of Steve in the building.
We've seen a lot of it. Yeah, good guy.
Thank you for that token.
Made it worth coming, right?
We appreciate you coming in. New committee, but we're here to help you in any way. Communications back and forth. If there's anything that we can do to help, let us know. We are an ag committee. We made that very clear in our first meeting. We are not a political meeting. We're an ag committee. We're here to help the people in agriculture in the state of Vermont. And so if we're missing something, communicate with us. Let us know anything that we can do, anything that we need to be aware of. Just make us aware, and we appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Good morning, Senate Agriculture, back in action. We are continuing through. We just met with all the people that we work for, the Agriculture Department. Very interesting, and we're discovering as a new committee that we have a lot of ground to cover, and there's a lot of, it's not just milking cows and tapping trees. We are going to meet again with their food security group. We have seen Carrie before. She's bringing a whole, and Maddie, and we're bringing a whole other group of folks in. So, welcome. How are you?
Thank
you. What would you like to tell us today?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Becca Warren. I live in Heartland. I'm a member of the Aquatic Center. And I represent the Vermont Food Security Roadmap Coalition, and I'm really pleased to be with you all today at the beginning of your session and just help you understand a little bit about the roadmap and any way that we can be helpful to your decisions this term. And with me today, Carrie Schuyler of the Vermont Food Bank. Am I allowed to introduce everybody?
Yes, please. You have the floor. You do whatever you'd like.
So these are coalition members. We have Autumn Moen from Hunger Free Vermont, and Maddie Kempner and Grace Odell from NOFA, and myself. And so today we're just going to introduce the food security roadmap to you and give a little overview about how you might be able to use it this session. And I have copies if I have permission to hand those out to anyone who doesn't have them.
Yeah.
My Post-its. I don't know why.
Don't hand those out.
I don't think they're mine. So we're here to talk with you because the roadmap is the direct result of legislative statute. And it came out of and is in service to the work of this Senate Agriculture Committee, among other committees, and it's a tool, as I said, that you can use to make policy choices. So Carrie's going to be our MC here. You can see my speaker notes.
Well,
Okay, we can go to the next one. So
you can look at it right here, Becca.
Oh. So fancy. Okay, so just an overview, this is what we're just going to go over today. So just a little bit about the food security roadmap to 2035, then talking a little bit about the status of food security in Vermont. So just give you an understanding of what we currently know about the complex issue of food security, and then talking about the policy requests that will be before you this session that could keep us on the road to food security. So that's what we'll be talking about. Yeah.
Tell us what food security means.
Exactly, a perfect question. So with this roadmap, we use the United Nations framework for food security, which is slightly more holistic than the United States definition, the USDA definition. And that is basically, we will know we were food secure in Vermont when everybody in Vermont has the food they need all the time, and that everyone is assured of economic access to their food that they need and want, physical access to the food they need and want, and social access. So we like that United Nations framework because it tells us when we'll know there is food security rather than focusing on the lack of food security. Really, and one thing about the roadmap is it really takes very seriously this idea both of all people having all the food that they need and want, so not leaving anybody out, not leaving anyone behind into that dignified future. And the other is thinking about at all times. So that's not just day to day, but thinking about, we're experiencing our new weather patterns. So do people have food when Barry's flooded? Do people have food when their farm is washed down the river, when the farm they've been getting food from is washed down the river? So thinking about preparedness, resiliency, agriculture, our agriculture as an asset. So it's thinking about all those things and so it's very related to a lot of different areas of legislation, not just agriculture, but we do put agriculture at the center.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking. So my first step here is I'm going to orient you to why we're here in Senate Ag, our first visit as a coalition. So this is a diagram from page 14 of the roadmap, which shows you how the roadmap relates to the Farm to Plate Investment Program, which was created through legislative statute. And so the legislature commissioned the roadmap, basically, through the Agriculture and Food System Strategic Plan. So this year we'll be hearing much more about the Farm to Plate Investment Program and the Farm to Plate Network in the next few weeks. Probably the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund Farm to Plate team will come in here and give you an overview and give you more background on that. And that can be kind of a deep dive. So this is really just to show you that the legislature created the Farm to Plate Investment Program, directed the state through the Jobs Fund to increase sustainable economic development and create jobs in the farm and food sector, to improve soils, water, and resiliency in the face of climate change, and to improve access to healthy local foods for all Vermonters. So the Jobs Fund and the Agency of Agriculture collaborated together and made the 10-year strategic plan for agriculture in Vermont. And I don't know if you all have a copy of that yet, but that's a large document that'll be coming your way. It really outlines what can be done to enhance our agricultural economy in the state. The roadmap came out of that strategic plan. So we're looking at the strategic plan. One recognition was that we want food security for our neighbors, for ourselves. We don't really have a holistic, shared, collaborative approach for how we're going to get there. And so the roadmap process is directly related and provides a level of detail in this strategic plan. So I will say that I consider this the Agriculture Committee's roadmap, simply from my participation in building the roadmap and then coming and presenting it to this committee and the House Ag a year ago now, I think. So I'm ready. Thank you, Assistant. So I just want to share that every time that we got to starting to work on creating the roadmap, and now that we're talking about moving forward with it, every time we meet, we pause before we meet and we think about that day in 2035 when there will be food security for everyone in Vermont. And I just want to invite you in this moment to try to imagine that day when we're standing in 2035 and we know that everyone in Vermont has food security and climate resiliency, and our agricultural sector is thriving and providing for our people. Imagining that hidden hunger no longer exists in Vermont because we all have the food we need, and what are those possibilities when no one in Vermont is hungry? And just imagining that we've all worked together in our mutually supporting roles to create a Vermont where there's equitable Vermont food security, Vermont grown food security for all, and how fulfilled we're all going to feel to know that we made that day possible. And that really helps us keep moving forward on this project. I'm just going to go a little bit into the roadmap itself right now. Carry forward. Yeah. So as I said, the food security roadmap came out of the Agriculture and Strategic Agricultural and Food System Strategic Plan. But it was also, the need for a holistic statewide food security plan was also called for in the Climate Action Plan and in the report from the Governor's Commission on the Future of Agriculture. These are all documents that came out 2020, 21, in those times when everyone was really thinking hard about what is going on with our food supply chain. Do we have the food that we need in the pandemic when national supply chains are getting more brittle? So then in 2022, with the support of the Department of Health and the Agency of Agriculture, a team of dedicated leaders within the Farm to Plate network assembled to design and implement a planning process to make this roadmap with a public engagement process. And we talked with over 600 Vermonters. There were over 120 organizations involved. Our approach was Vermonters know how to solve this issue in their own communities for their own families and neighbors. There's expertise in Vermont about the barriers and the successes that are going to work here. So let's get as much of that information as we can. And so then in the roadmap itself, you'll see there's goals, objectives, strategies, and those all come out of 2 years of talking to people across the state. And then those strategies either came out of those conversations or they already existed in another state planning document, like the Climate Action Plan or the Strategic Plan, and they were affirmed by those public conversations. So, is this the one we're seeing now?
Yes.
Great, okay, so then in the end, all that information was pulled into 3 goals that we're gonna work toward, and we know that when these goals are achieved, we'll have food security in Vermont. So then one of them is that communities have the tools to support food security. Another is that Vermont farms have the resources to be resilient. And another is that government ensures food security for all in Vermont. And so the puzzle piece, a very simple graphic just representing we need to have all these pieces together, and then we'll have that puzzle of food security solved. So at the end of the time of writing the roadmap, this group that you're seeing on our slide here was involved with sort of the final pieces of it and became very committed to deepening our collaboration and forming the Vermont Security Roadmap Coalition. And you'll, as Mr. Chair, you recognize, you've already seen some of the coalition members in here.
Yeah.
And we are, part of this slide is to let you know that when you see Carrie come in with the food bank or you see Maddie come in with NOFA, they might mention the roadmap, they might mention the Roadmap Coalition, and that is reflecting this shared work that we're doing together, recognizing that food security has many components, especially in Vermont with our agriculture resource that we have, and that we're all working together on these policy choices that we're bringing to you. And I think we're ready for our next slide. Just wanted to give you an example because we started really working as a coalition with the roadmap goals last year, and we were able to make some progress. So I want to thank Senator Collmore and Senator Ingalls, because you all were part of just passing some of these items we have listed here. So last year we were able to appropriate funds for Crop Crash and Farm Share, support the Vermont Food Bank and its network of meal sites and food shelves, support Meals on Wheels, support the Land Access and Opportunity Board, Universal School Meals, Farm to School, recovery for flooded farms and businesses, which I think you might have just heard from the agency team, some details about how that occurred, just guessing. And then supporting Vermont 211 to maintain itself at 24/7, come back to 24/7 service. I have one note I want to say about this Act 143, which is maybe a sort of more subtle achievement that we were able to make together with some of the committees in the State House, which was modifying the emergency management planning language to include food security as a planning consideration and include local food access points and organizations in the planning process for emergencies. And that was a new thing in the emergency management language that ended up being Act 143. And so that was just incredibly exciting to get moving on that, more emergency preparedness related to food. And also in that bill was it was requested a report on the restaurant meals program, which is an option that the state can take to have SNAP recipients use their benefits at restaurants to allow more flexibility for people, which also relates to emergencies. So that is just a quick overview of the roadmap. I'm going to pass it to Autumn, who's going to talk about some of the current status of food security in Vermont.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I ask a quick question before, if that's okay? First of all, thank you for being a member of the Aquatic Center.
Thank you. Thank you.
Why 2035?
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
Why 2035? The reason that I asked this question is more that the road will always be changing with climate, with the amount of people, more or less, that are in the state. So the target will always be changing. Thus, why 2035?
Right. Well, one consideration is, I think, without choosing a target, we'll continue business as usual, and for many of our neighbors, that's not working for many of ourselves. So then another consideration is, what is the timeline where we know we need to be ready for things that are happening? And seeing, when we started looking, when we started working on this project to build a collaborative path forward, we were in the pandemic. And so seeing that we don't have a lot of time left, and we're already learning what we can do to be effective in terms of creating food security during an emergency state, and we already have a lot of ideas about how to create food security in Vermont in the daily, day-to-day. And so in thinking about that deadline we wanted to give ourselves, we thought, well, there's a high level of urgency. We're already on the road, we're doing a lot of things that are gonna create food security in the state, and hearing from folks across the state, we can do this now, we can do it in Vermont. If it can be done anywhere, it can be done in Vermont, and this is what we need to get done. So hearing that urgency and thinking about, all right, let's move forward.
How do you measure it, that you're moving towards that 2035?
Such a great question.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to remember. I know that one of our UVM research teams was in, I think they were in House Ag yesterday. We have a lot of great research capacity in the state with a UVM research team that works on food security questions. Well, and I think, so we have that asset here, and they're excited to work with us on creating measurements. And what is going to happen next in our presentation actually is going through some of the different data points that give us a picture. And I think what we'll be doing, until there becomes another sort of like smaller data point we can collect, we'll be looking at all of these data points that you're about to hear about.
May I interject?
Of course.
It's a good question, because actually one of the things called for in the roadmap is better data collection. And that the state needs to be responsible for that as the organization that works across sectors, both agriculture sectors and human services sectors, to understand people's experiences, to understand the experiences of farms. And so there is an opportunity, while we do have assets that can help us set those measurements, there is an opportunity to figure out how to collect that data on with what frequency, who's responsible for that, and how that data informs decisions that you all are making here on a regular basis. And it is somewhat of a gap in the state at the moment. We do have a research team at UVM that does have a cadence of surveying that they do around food security issues. They are making their own choices about that and willing to work with other partners, but they are not funded by our work. They're not funded by the state. They're going out and getting grants to do, studies that they feel might be valuable to the state of Vermont. But I think, at one point, the Agency of Human Services was working to set up a whole set of data points that they would collect about population level data. That project, I think at some point was put on the back burner because I believe the pandemic happened and AHS was overwhelmed. But there have been attempts at different times for the state to really wrangle data that they have from hospitals and health systems, from different agriculture systems, from different organizations doing poverty relief work, to really try and put together a full picture of those experiences that Vermonters are having. Some of those measurements are things that we use
on an ad hoc basis to try and help us form a clearer picture of what those sort of data levers are. But there is improvement to be made in that area.
I guess I'd share Senator Major's question as well. It's glad to hear him ask the question, because I hope that we don't need to wait for anything for 2035 to make sure that it is secure and that we are reaching goals and all. And we're going to hear some statistics next. So yeah, when you're hungry or there's a underserved part of your community that is such a basic need as being able to nutrient themselves, you know, some people can't wait till 2035.
Right, and it is not the goal to wait to 2035. It is the goal to begin rolling in some of these changes immediately. How we measure the impact of those, I think, is a great thing for us to be thinking about together. None of our organizations are research organizations. We all do different aspects of work, but really by and large, there is the need for someone to hold that data piece and help all of us understand these impacts as the projects roll out and as the policies roll out and as this work is done.
Well, cool. Well, let's hear more.
Yeah, let's see what you, with this information that Autumn is going to present, if that kind of gives a little bit of a data picture, although it's going to be a kind of cluster of data. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Becca.
All right, hi, my name is Autumn Moen. I'm the Legislative Policy Lead at Hunger Free Vermont. Like Becca said, I'm going to get into a bit of context setting data, so I'm going to share both some quotes about how Vermonters are feeling as well as some data to kind of mesh those two things together. So as Becca was saying, we talked to lots of people while making the roadmap, and they shared how they were doing economically. So in this first quote, this person said, "Nothing would really change until poverty and economic inequality are shifted. People aren't only hungry because of inadequate food access programs." So this reminds us that all of the prongs of the roadmap are important. We need funding and expanding of food access programs, and that's incredibly important, but we also need to take steps to address the root causes of hunger, which are poverty and economic inequality. Because as this next person said, food insecurity is a function of financial insecurity. And this leads people to make decisions like on the quote on the right, "I'm down to eating one meal a day, so I don't need to choose between paying a huge energy bill or being able to eat." Go to the next slide. So to bring in a few numbers to give some context to this, according to the most recent JFO basic needs budget, fewer than half of single adult households in Vermont could meet their basic needs. So lots of people are struggling to afford the necessities. And why is that? Well, there's many factors, obviously, but to name a few, go to the next slide. Housing has become unaffordable for many Vermonters. Over half of both homeowners and renters pay an unaffordable rate for housing, which is defined as over 30% of their income. And on top of this, prices in Vermont are slightly above the national average. So when I say prices, this is an average price data gathered by the federal government that combines things like food, transportation, housing, medical services, things like that. Averaged prices are above the national average in Vermont, but wages are stuck below the national average. So our wages rank 32nd in the country and the second worst in New England. So our wages are not keeping up with the cost of living, and people are really feeling that. And then here's just a reminder as well that not everyone in Vermont experiences this equally. Vermonters of color experience higher rates of poverty, with Black Vermonters and Indigenous Vermonters facing twice the state average rate of poverty. So we know people are struggling economically, and we also know that this is directly related to food security. So to kind of, again, contextualize this food security piece, someone shared during the roadmap that we are your neighbors, we worked hard, we had illness or accidents, we're poor or poorer than we used to be, and we can't afford the food we need. Another person shared that no one should go hungry or not have access to healthy food options, again speaking to this piece of both hunger but also the access to healthy foods and that choice of making food decisions that align with their values and their goals. And then on this other piece on the right, someone shared that I think COVID and its lingering effects have shown that food security is not just about access, but also about supply chain resilience. And I think work on food security should take both into account. So you'll see that the roadmap does take multiple aspects of food security into account. So to get into a little food security data, since the end of pandemic government supports, food security is rising every year. Since 2021, the number of households at risk of hunger in the US has risen by 33%, and here in Vermont, 7.2% of households were at risk of hunger in 2021 compared to 9.6% in 2023. And those numbers aren't important. We don't need to memorize all the numbers or anything, but just to note that this trend is going upward, and that's not what we want to be seeing with food security in our state. And there is more recent data specifically on Vermont. As Becca was sharing, the UVM research team and Dr. Meredith Niles just released their report actually yesterday. So there's a lot of new data around food security in Vermont, and I'm sure they'd be willing to come in and speak to that if that's something that you're interested in. Okay. And these numbers align with high level of needs seen at Vermont Food Bank Network partners across the state. An average of 72,000 people use the Vermont Food Bank Network food access sites each month across the state. And Vermonters are also utilizing federal SNAP benefits. That's the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. This is called 3 Squares Vermont in our state. 65,000 individuals receive 3 Squares benefits each month, equating to about 40,000 households.
Sorry.
That's okay.
3
Squares Vermont recipients, they can use their benefits on what's called an electronic benefits transfer card or EBT card. They can use those benefits to purchase groceries at the grocery store or at local farmers markets. So that's a little bit of context, hopefully kind of situate us in the status of how Vermonters are feeling both economically and then specifically on food security. I'm going to pass it off to Maddie with NOFA to talk more about this like agricultural piece and give you some data on how that all weaves into it as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any questions?
I don't know if this is actually directed to you, but first of all, I'm going to ask some questions that might upset some of you, but what I need to know is like, what you're doing is great, but how is it when we've seen this at our food bank, that they come in and collect food, but they pull in a $60,000 vehicle, that we don't pay attention to where they're spending their money, do we not?
So this is a question that I actually get with some frequency. So it is...
Because I know the people that you're really aiming for do need it. And food security sometimes is mismanagement of your funds rather than, and how do we address that?
I think there are, so from my perspective and the perspective of the Vermont Food Bank, why people come to a food access location to receive free food is because they need it. No one is really showing up, at this point there's still enough stigma around showing up at a location to receive free food that most people aren't showing up just because they feel like this is free and I can do whatever I want. In talking to neighbors at a lot of our Veggie Van Go events, which are drive-through, so you get to see everybody's car. I've had people tell me, my family helped me buy this car because otherwise I couldn't get a car or get transportation, but I can't ask them to help me with food every week. I've had people tell me that they have a car and a car loan, but they've lost their job and they're not gonna sell their car in order to feed themselves. So there's a balance every week. I still have to pay my car payment, and that helps me get to the food shelf or food pantry or, Veggie Van Go to get food. But if I sell my car, then I can't get that either, but I might have some more money for a little while, right? And so I think these are really hard decisions that our neighbors are making all the time. And I understand where that question is coming from, and I do understand what you're saying about financial management. I think financial management often comes from a place of a scarcity mentality, right? Not having enough, but needing to do this, and maybe not having enough to make a great decision about that, so making a decision about this, right? Like, it often comes from this place of having a set of not so great choices and trying to make the best of those choices, as opposed to maybe the choices that you and I have, which are a set of better choices. And I think it's a balance, and I really challenge myself and and others to consider the complexity of everyone's life and why they may have made those choices. And understand that food is like 3 meals a day, 365 days a year. And it is one of the very few no barrier social service programs that we have available to folks, and is an easy and often very accessible way for folks to save a few dollars when they really are desperate.
Agreed. And that's the hard, what we're just speaking about, because I have employees that I watch what they do, and it's like, oh, but I don't have any food. Well, you just went out and got a $300 tattoo. You gotta put your life in perspective. And it's hard for us that manage well. And well, I'm hungry. Well, you gotta manage better. So I know it's hard for the food bank to take that in consideration, but for our constituents, I hear from that, and it's like, how do we address that somebody's doing that? Because I still, just like you said, I want to see everybody fed. But if you're mismanaging your life, it's hard for me to give when you continually do it over again. So that's what I have in mind. What you're doing is great. Support it. We'll continue to support it. But it's hard when you have constituents that come and say, hey, what can we do about this?
You and I should have a separate conversation outside of the committee. Perhaps there are some resources for that the CAP agencies offer around financial literacy and financial planning that have helped folks who are often in that situation.
You will.
I would also say, because I am on the board of the Upper Valley Haven, which partakes in food, the number of people that abuse this is negligible. There are people who do it. I'm not saying that. But the number as far as percentage, and sometimes we focus on that as far as the number of people, that small minority, because they do it, then the greater good of the number that it actually helps. And if we can, kind of get past that, which I understand the frustration of it, because it is a frustration. I think we serve the greater good by doing it.
I think sometimes you have to ask the question. And I think sometimes you have to ask the question and hear the answer. And because, you serve everybody. Everybody, there's some people out there that might feel that way, or might feel this way, or feel that way, or feel this way. So I just think that anytime that you need to form a decision or move in a direction, you gotta hear it all. So
Certainly happy to continue to answer those hard questions.
I appreciate all of that.
It was a hard question to ask, but I've been asked to ask it.
Yeah.
Well, it is.
And it's important.
And it all is, and it all is, and again, you're gonna talk about it all, right? That's what we do, so.
Absolutely.
Should we switch to Maddie?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for having me back today.
Well, thanks for coming back. Good to see you in person.
Yes, nice to see you too. All right, so I want to share a little bit about the agricultural aspect of the roadmap. As we know, farms are central to our culture and our community here in Vermont, and central to achieving food security. So we know that Vermont farmers are struggling with profitability at the same time that too many of our neighbors can't afford the food that they need. So the roadmap lays out a path where we can address the really dual and intersecting challenges of farm viability and food security at the same time. So here are some quotes that we heard from folks that we reached out to and talked with in developing the roadmap. First, someone said, if we can find a way to feed people healthfully and affordably and keep their dollars in Vermont, that would be the gold standard. A farmer said, I haven't really raised my prices in many, many years, and the cost of everything has gone up. I want lower income people to have access to organic, nutrient-dense food, and so how do I still make a living and make my product affordable? I can say specifically in our work at NOFA, this is something we hear all the time. A lot of our farmers really go above and beyond to to set their prices and to market their products and to do their work in a community in a way that makes it accessible to as many people as possible. And they're facing the same pressures around inflation and supply chain disruptions and increasing costs that so many other folks are, and they aren't always in a position to be able to pass those costs on. So it's a challenge that a lot of farmers struggle with. And then finally, someone said, I feel confident about farmers' ability to grow lots of delicious, nutritious food. It's about who has the money to access it. All right, and some data for you on the agriculture side of things. According to the 2022 economic census, Vermont's food system generated over $14.4 billion in direct economic impact, including $1.6 billion in direct wages. And I have to say, beyond this economic impact, and I touched on this a little bit in our introduction of NOFA on Tuesday, our farmers and food producers provide so many other benefits to Vermont communities as well. They contribute to our collective food security and climate change resiliency. They shorten supply chains. They strengthen rural economies. They build soil health, and they play important roles in civic life and so much more. I always feel the need to sort of fill in that gap because we focus a lot on economic impact and it is critical, and it's really important to remember what the data often doesn't talk about as much, which is all those other benefits of farms. Unfortunately, so many of our farms here in Vermont are struggling to stay profitable or to become profitable. In 2022, 4,364 farms under 140 acres, which represents 66.8% of Vermont farms, accounted for just over 78% of farms with net negative cash incomes. So essentially what this is saying is that particularly a lot of our smaller farms are really struggling with profitability. And I will say again, anecdotally, this is something we hear from farmers all the time. And it's not just the teeny tiny farms that are hobby farms that are, more on the homestead scale. It's a lot of commercial enterprises, and oftentimes it's sort of, you wouldn't know it from knowing a farmer as the pillar of the community that they often are, or as someone who a farmer who's lifted up as really an example of success in agriculture. Too many of those farmers are struggling right now, and we have to figure out how to address that. And then finally, as I talked about a little bit, and I'm sure you've heard a lot about already this session, catastrophic flooding in 2023 caused $44.7 million in damage and losses to the state's farm businesses. And fortunately, the state was able to provide some meaningful relief through the BGAP program in 2023 and again in 2024. We have learned from this experience, and we can use what we learned to move forward in a better direction. And now we're going to share a little bit more about our policy requests this year to keep us on the road to food security. These are organized into 3 specific issue areas, all of which again are intersecting food access, agriculture, and community priorities. And I have to say too, lest you think we are all doom and gloom based on some of that data, we are not. We feel, I think, and I can speak for the coalition as a whole, and I will say personally, incredibly hopeful. Doing this work requires that we are hopeful, and it reinforces that hope all the time because we get to work with people who are doing incredible things to make these circumstances better. So the roadmap shows us the way to achieve full food security for Vermont by 2035, and these priorities are the next steps that we need to take in this journey together in order to move closer to a vision, our shared vision of a food secure Vermont where everyone has the food they need and want, and farms have the resources to be resilient. These are our specific priorities for 2025. And we hope you'll join us in supporting them. So first, passing legislation to implement the SNAP Restaurant Meals Program in Vermont, including funding for administration and restaurant equipment costs. The Restaurant Meals Program, for anyone who's not familiar, is a state option for SNAP, also known as 3 Squares Vermont. In our state, this program would allow 3 Squares recipients who are over the age of 60, have a disability, or are unhoused to use their benefits to purchase ready-made meals at participating restaurants. Secondly, we are asking the legislature to fund Vermont Food Bank's request for $1.75 million in base funding to support responsive readiness, thank you, and $3.25 million for food purchase and distribution. Vermont Food Bank has been acting as an informal partner for the state for years, and with this request, we are asking the state to formalize that relationship and fund that support with this base appropriation and additional funding to support food purchase. This is really reflective also of the increasing rates of food insecurity that the food bank is responding to. And then finally, as we talked about a little bit on Tuesday as well, increasing public investment for NOFA Vermont's Crop Cash Plus and Farm Share programs to $500,000 in base funding. The Crop Cash and Farm Share programs will allow more Vermonters to access healthy local food while supporting farmers in their communities and circulating dollars in the local economy. In terms of the agriculture priorities specifically, as I mentioned the other day too, we are asking the legislature to pass the Farm Security Fund, which will support farmers in recovering from climate emergencies and extreme weather events. And that will build on the success that we experience from the BGAP program. And then secondly, we're asking the legislature to fully fund the work of the Land Access and Opportunity Board, which is a state structure currently housed within the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board that supports marginalized people and communities with financial and other resources that they need to gain access to land and housing. And then finally, we are asking the legislature to expand and increase accessibility to the Vermont Earned Income Tax Credit and the Vermont Child Tax Credit. These anti-poverty tax credits increase financial stability for Vermont families so they can cover their basic needs, live with dignity, and build stronger communities. The child tax credit and the earned income tax credit help the lowest income Vermonters fill the gap between income and expenses while providing cash that they need when they file their taxes. And then finally, converting the $323,000 in one-time funding for Vermont 211 to base funding. There are certainly other priorities that complement this work, including work on affordable housing, as we've mentioned, and sheltering our unhoused neighbors, work on transportation, and others that are named in the roadmap. So we really encourage you to look closely at the roadmap yourselves and consider how your lives, the lives of your constituents and your communities would be improved and impacted by all of this work. And we welcome your feedback.
So as far as all of this is all brand new? This is a brand new initiative as far as the 2035 initiative? I guess my question is have you been before this committee before? Because we're all brand new. Mm-hmm. Have you been before this committee before in this capacity and received funding from the state?
The answer to that, my understanding, would be different for different priorities included here. So some of these priorities have been funded by the state in the past, whether at the same level or a different level, and some of them are new. And the roadmap itself is not brand new. It was first introduced to the legislature during the last session, I believe, right, 2024. But it also builds on ongoing work. So like Becca mentioned at the introduction, it builds on the work of the Vermont Agri-Strategic Plan, which runs from 2020 to 2030, and it builds on other existing initiatives like the Climate Action Plan and the Governor's Commission on the Future of Agriculture. So some of this is a new initiative, but it's really building on lots of other foundational work that's been around.
And I think one way to think about it, and Senator Collmore, you heard our presentation last year, I think it's taking things that have been somewhat siloed in the past and weaving them together in a way that helps all of us work more in collaboration to meet these sort of multifaceted goals around community, around agriculture, and around food security. So, some of the things in here are somewhat new. Some of them are really just a new way to look at solutions that are also included in these other plans that Maddie's describing.
I can say specifically too, as someone who's really mostly worked on agriculture and is focused or knows the most about the ag priorities here, it's interesting that we really have to work to make the connection between the work our farmers do and our agricultural sector with food security. I think there are too many folks who take for granted that food comes from farms and that we need our farms to thrive as businesses in order to keep that food on people's tables, and we need specific programs and policy changes to make it more accessible to folks. So to Carrie's point, really weaving these areas of work and these needs together is incredibly important, and to have it tied to food security on the timeline of the roadmap kind of puts a different sense of urgency and focus on it that we feel is really needed.
So what would you say that the increase of what you're asking for, I can see, I know what you're doing, I can see the urgency of what you're trying to get to. I can understand that there's some monies here, there's monies there, and all of that. What do you think the increase as far as the amount of monies that you would receive from this committee in previous years versus what you're asking now? What do you think that increase is? Because those are things we need to understand. We need to understand about where the dollars are. We're not a money committee, but we are a committee that, that handles money as far as requests and stuff. I mean, we asked the same question before you guys got here, okay, Agency of Agriculture. What's your money source? What do you have? What do you handle? What do you do? We found out, they handle $57 billion worth of money. So when we're gotten groups coming in front of us, trying to parse out as far as where our budgets go and all of that, where are we as far as an increase as far as where we were in previous years? Is that an easy question to answer? Or, and I'm not trying to,
We have the total
it's,
off the top.
Well, I think I could probably help answer that most clearly. Yeah, so last year, the two financial requests that are included again this year that were funded were a request for the Vermont Food Bank. That money actually did not come out of the agriculture budget. It ended up going through the DCF budget line.
Right.
It was,
and that's the reason why we asked that, because if we can't do it here, where else can we go?
well,
So I'm
and
not trying to pin you down to like, oh shoot, we didn't succeed there. Well, maybe you did succeed there, but we weren't able to get you there, but we were able to put you someplace else.
Yes.
So that's why we asked the question.
And I think there's a little bit of complexity there as well about jurisdiction over food issues and food security issues. And when you look at and read the roadmap, I suspect each of you will be able to see a very clear connection to the agriculture committee work that you're doing. But I suspect that you will also see connections to your afternoon committee work. So I think offering that, that you bring both of those lenses to this when you flip through this document is really critical. And is part of the process of how the Vermont Food Bank came asking for dollars for food purchase, ended up in the DCF budget, but is actually spending those dollars through our Vermonters Feeding Vermonters program with Vermont farms. So maybe not entirely logical, but really a good outcome. That request last year was for $5 million. We received $1.3 million. We're again asking for a total of $5 million. And it could be spread through various budget lines. NOFA last year also came asking for about $500,000. You got 370?
We got 300.
300.
Our ask was 478,000.
That's what it was, yeah. So roughly a $200,000 gap between last year and this
Right,
year.
and that's the same question we asked NOFA the other day when you were on the screen and all that stuff. And for anybody that's watching from home, or for anybody that's gonna come back in again on another capacity, this committee is always gonna ask that. And it's because it's our obligation to the taxpayer and to everyone else, but it's also our obligation to you to say, again, as I said just a few minutes ago, if we don't have it here, and it's something that we absolutely positively believe as a committee that we think that this should go forward, let us help you find your path forward. We've done that over and over and over again in our other committees. That's why we asked the question.
And before we finish, I just want to offer the other piece that was funded last year that is asking for funding again is the Land Access and Opportunity Board that very clearly fits within your committee structure. They received $1 million last year. I don't have the exact number in front of me that they're asking for this year, but we can get back to the committee with that information when we have it. I suspect it will be something within the relative ballpark of that amount.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm sorry that I'm getting into a little bit of the weeds with this. For the SNAP, for the SNAP restaurant, how do you determine what restaurants or they can go to, and then what foods they can purchase?
Do you mind if I step out of this chair and offer it to Autumn so she can answer
Whatever you guys want to do.
you? Yeah, why don't you come answer that, Autumn?
Here, no, you sit here.
Okay.
You stay here. So I got this one.
You stay in
I
there.
Okay.
That's a great question. So the state can tailor the SNAP Restaurant Meals program to be kind of whatever we want it to be, which I think is a really good strength of the program. So a few other states have it and they all operate in different ways, but we would be able to say, like, we want certain criteria to have a restaurant qualify. So maybe they serve local foods, or they're in a rural part of the state where there aren't a lot of restaurants there, or maybe they are in a city where there's a high need for the program. Maybe there's a high unhoused population there, so we want to include restaurants in that area. So we can really tailor it however we want to. And then to answer your question, was it what foods they can buy there? There wouldn't be any restrictions on what folks can buy there. Again, this program is really to offer choice and flexibility for people when they're going to get meals. But there would be a requirement that the restaurants have menu options that are lower price. So whether that is something that already exists on their menu and that's just something they offer to everyone, or if they have they add a few extra things that would qualify for this. But there wouldn't be a separate menu that goes to folks who are paying with SNAP benefits. Just, that's an added layer of stigma to have a different menu and all that. So we don't want any of those hoops for people to jump through, but there would be a requirement that they have a lower price point option on their menu.
And the reason I ask is that from an equity standpoint, I want to make sure that our rural Vermonters are able to access this program and they have to travel a certain amount of time that we have restaurants that can serve them as well.
Yeah, and part of the ask is to include a restaurant meals program navigator position within DCF that would really help restaurants go through the application process, help the state onboard restaurants into the program, and they would be able to do outreach to hopefully every town, every community across Vermont, or at least every county, and make sure that there are restaurants all over the state that are participating, so folks, like you said, don't have to drive far to be able to access these meals. So.
Thank you.
Of course.
Mr. Chair, the $5 million figure, I assume that does not include the additional cost of SNAP or of expanding the SNAP program or of the expansion of the tax credits?
No, and the tax credits is, so the restaurant meals program, the cost for that is essentially a position and some technical costs. So it's, not one I know off the top of my head, but I should.
Yeah. Are you talking about the?
I got my question answered. Just
Yeah.
yes or no on whether.
And the tax
to think about
credit
that.
piece, just for clarity for others on the committee, the tax credit piece is not an expense. It would be essentially more support for outreach so that folks who are already eligible for those tax credits are more able to access them. And that is a challenge at our state level, that the lowest income folks who are eligible for those refundable tax credits are not always able.
I'll ask you afterwards about that.
Great.
I would just add too to that point that with the SNAP Restaurant Meals Program, all of the funding for benefits for folks is all federal
It's
dollars.
federal,
Yeah, so
I wasn't talking. I wasn't asking
that's
about
okay.
where
Just
the
wanted
money
to,
was coming
totally
from.
just wanted to reiterate that because I think that's really important that money gets to go back into our local economy.
Well, good.
Great.
What else?
I'm gonna just breeze through the end of our presentation here, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't need the comfy chair. I'm great. So I want to reiterate the partners around the state and just, you've met a number of us here today. I'm sure you will meet Ellen and Jake from the Sustainable Jobs Fund. And I'm just going to go through some of the faces that you're going to see in the State House. And I really want you to consider these folks resources. We're here to help you unpack this document. We're here to help you understand the intersections with this committee's work and other committees' work. And hopefully you will start to recognize us as you see us more frequently. So Autumn and Honor Horton are going to be here to support from Hunger Free Vermont. Maddie and Grace are both here today. But you have already met Joanna, and you may meet Jessica as well.
And I would ask this too, and I don't want to stop you, I would ask all of you, when you see us in the hallway, introduce yourself again. Tell us who you are, and do that, because it really, really helps. We're seeing a lot of people, it's a fire hose. And
Yes.
so don't be afraid to, because you can get to your conversation and it helps to know what we're talking about, other than us saying, oh, yeah, okay. Just don't be afraid to say, oh, yeah, you remember, yeah, so.
This is why we've included our photos for you.
Exactly.
So it's not just names on the screen.
And it helps.
You met John and I yesterday. Ellen and Jake should be in if they have not yet been here already from the Sustainable Jobs Fund. Monica Collins volunteers with a small organization called Feeding the Valley Alliance and has been absolutely critical to our understanding of communities she represents communities in the Mad River, the southern part of the Mad River Valley, so a bunch of very small, very rural communities that have some unique food access challenges around, among other things. And then Becca Warren, who is our Fearless Food Security Coalition manager. And just a lot of gratitude for all of you for having us here, for your really great questions, and for the work that we're going to be able to do together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming in. Nice to meet all you folks.
Thank you.
Yes. Well, cool. What else do we have here?
That's it for today, unless there are further questions.